Claude is Claude, right? If you take the same model and talk to it through 3 different coding agents, Claude Code, Cursor, OpenCode, how much does the agent wrapper actually matter? Or is the model all that counts? Let's take Opus, give it the same prompt using 3 different coding agents, and see what happens. When you talk to Claude in a coding context, you're not talking directly to Claude, you're talking to an agent, a tool that takes your prompt, decides how to act on it, calls Claude, reads your files, searches the internet, runs commands, and then loops till it's done. The agent is a wrapper around the model, and it turns out that the wrapper matters more than I expected. An agent is an AI system that can perceive information, make decisions, and take actions autonomously to achieve a goal. In this video, we'll cover coding agents in 3 general categories. The first is a native agent, built by the same company that makes the model. For example, Claude Code is Anthropic's own coding agent, optimized specifically for how Claude thinks and works. The second is a third-party agent, a tool built by someone else that routes to Claude under the hood. Cursor is a popular example. And it's model agnostic, so you can point it at Claude, GPT, Gemini, whatever you want. The third is an open source agent, community built and transparent. An example is OpenCode. Also model agnostic, you can read exactly what it's doing and self-host it if you want. For this test, I'll be using the same model across all 3 coding agents. Claude Opus 4.7, starting with the default Xhigh effort level. Opus 4.8 dropped recently, but I wanted to give the integration some time to stabilize. So today we're going with 4.7. The comparison still holds. This video is about the agents and not the model. The rules are simple. Every agent gets an identical series of prompts. I'll be tracking 4 things: the quality of the final output, time to a working result, total cost, and how it gets there. Does it ask me clarifying questions or just start building? Does it run commands itself or hand them back to me? Does it check its own work? Does it get stuck? 3 agents, 1 model. Let's get into it. Starting with the same base prompt across all 3 agents. Build a local web dashboard showing real-time system metrics, with some additional requirements. Once we get an initial build, we'll see how it extends the existing architecture, manages state, and makes layout decisions. If you don't want to see me going through each of these agents, you can skip ahead to see the results at the end. Otherwise, let's start with Anthropic's own coding agent, Claude Code. There's IDE integrations and a desktop app, but we're going to be using the popular terminal interface. Let's enter the prompt. We can see a timer alongside the tokens. And it's asking if it can check my node version and see what files are in this directory. Let me be the most permissive. Do you want a package.json? Do you want to install the dependencies? Do you want to build the front end? Do you want to run the server and check the endpoints? Done. So let's start it and open the browser. Yes, start the server. Yes, open the dashboard. And it's running on port 3001. And here's our live view. Data streaming in every second. Got CPU and memory. This looks pretty good. So let's add our first follow-up prompt and add network throughput. And we have a fresh timer and token count. So you can see Claude Code's making edits, showing the diffs and checking its own work. All right, do you want to open the new dashboard? Yes. All right, network throughput looks good. It can extend the existing architecture. Now let's add a time range toggle to test UI state management. You want to rebuild the front end and restart the server? Yes. All right, we had 2 minutes before, asked for 5. Also see 1 minute, that looks good. And our last addition, we'll add disk I/O read-write speeds. Okay, our dashboard is filling up. We have 3 full-width cards at the bottom. It's all right, it's fine. Claude Code lets you check the total usage for the session. So I pay a flat fee subscription plan. I'm on Pro, so this is just an estimated usage-based cost if they had to estimate $2.42. But that consumed 25% of my daily session limit. That's a bit more than I expected. I'm also running this on the weekend during off-peak hours, so it should be less expensive. And you can see how long it took. There's actually a decent gap between API time and wall time, or how much time elapsed on a clock on the wall. So that's how long it actually took. Because the default behavior for Claude Code is to hand off a lot of decisions to the user, but you can configure that setting. So that's the general flow. Let's go a bit faster with our open source OpenCode, also in the terminal using Xhigh. Let's enter the prompt. And on the side, we have another token counter with a tally of the costs. So very transparent. We are using our Anthropic API key here. So this is bring your own key. So this cost here is actual cost. It's actually usage-based billing versus before I had a subscription. And you see the same model reasoning, to-dos over on the side, code diffs. It needs permission to access an external directory, allow always, and it's handling the end-to-end testing. All right, looks like it's done. Let's open a new terminal prompt, list out the files in the directory. Here's the code it wrote, and run it. And let's check out our host stats. Yeah, some differences, but I'm not expecting anything drastically different. It's the same model, just a different tool, just using different tools with different tendencies. All right, let's speed run through the follow-ups and we'll compare everything at the end. And last, our third-party agent Cursor. Again, using Xhigh. We'll enter the first prompt in the agent panel, and you can see the same model reasoning. And because Cursor is a full IDE forked from VS Code, you can see the scaffolding as it comes in and inspect and edit the code in the same interface. But the same to-dos, code diffs, and it's checking its own work. Looks like it's done. Let's open a terminal prompt to start our server. And another nice dashboard. All right, again, let's speed through these follow-ups and compare everything side by side at the very end. All three dashboards came out pretty similar in functionality, UX, and design choices, which makes sense because we're talking about the same model here. But how it got there was different, like how hands-off it was, how long it took, and how much it cost. On tokens, each agent wraps the model using a different system prompt and handles context injection differently. If you look at the cache reads and writes for this session, Cursor processed about 2 times more context than Claude Code, even though it generated less output. That's because Cursor is a full IDE, so it's injecting more file tree and editor state into every turn, so it has a bigger context footprint to manage. But token counts across agents aren't apples to apples. Each tool reports on them a little bit differently. Total cost is the more meaningful comparison. So 2 important caveats before we move on. All 3 can run on either a subscription or API usage-based billing. So actual cost and cost predictability depends on how you set it up. Autonomy isn't fixed either. By default, Claude Code requires manual approval at each step, while Cursor enables auto-run. That alone affects how long things take and how hands-off the experience feels. The defaults I tested are just the defaults. You can absolutely customize that behavior. That was Opus 4.7 at Xhigh, the default and recommended effort level, which gives you deep reasoning while still balancing latency. I reran the same prompts at max effort, where the model has no limits on how many tokens it spends thinking. It's typically worth it for the hardest prompts, but I wanted to see what happens when you crank it up on a task that doesn't really need it. I expect more effort to mean more time and more cost. Claude Code went from the cheapest and fastest to taking 3 times as long and costing 4 times as much. OpenCode roughly doubled in time and cost. That's a predictable level of scaling. Cursor took the same amount of time as Xhigh and only cost 30% more. Either Cursor caps max effort more aggressively, or its agentic loop is so great it already does at Xhigh what max effort offers. So the takeaway here is that max effort scales unpredictably across agents, so effort level matters. The agent wrapper determines how aggressively max actually gets used. This was just one task. Your benchmarks should cover different types of tasks that are important to you. front end or back end, or refactoring or debugging. I wanted to run this comparison because the gap between top models is getting smaller. Some of that is saturation in static benchmarks, but we see it in human preference too. Over time, the top models are getting harder and harder to differentiate. But the agent harness around the model, there's still a ton of variation. Let me know if you agree, and if you have a favorite coding agent, what did I miss? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.